Hello, everyone, and welcome to the exclusive Fireside chat series on a very interesting theme on humanized technology for future strong organizations. In this series, we'll talk to senior industry leaders from various industries about their approach towards technology, the blue collar ecosystem, the adoption of digital platforms, and human versus tech. Businesses have progressively got more digitized over the last decade. The difference between being digital and being human is getting blurred as well. The significant collaboration of technology aiding human effort has been fundamental in shaping our work and the possibilities therein. When organizations step into a new world of work, we are faced with the inevitable question of extending this humanized technology on the largest workforce of organization or be left behind in the new normal, which has already become a reality. This would reduce a digital divide between a blue collar worker and a white collar worker. Simple technology that is easy to comprehend and natural to use will become a catalyst to meet the needs of the blue collar ecosystem and positively create the biggest difference for organizations. On that note, I would like to welcome my guest for my first episode. And in today's episode, we have with us Rahul Maitra, CHRO Ambuja Cements. Rahul is an industry veteran with more than 21 years of experience across sectors. He has worked with some prominent names such as Tata Tea, Tata Motors, Park Hotels, to name a few. Currently, he is the CHRO for Ambuja, where he is leading the people performance agenda of the organization through productivity, process improvement, and reigniting the I can culture and understanding people needs. Welcome to the show, Rahul.
Thank you, Abhay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you here. My next guest is Vishal Singh, Vice President and Head Enterprise BetterPlace. Vishal has worn multiple hats in his 18 plus years of experience. His work span started with automobile, then telecom, enterprise sales, and then ventured into the human resource consulting domain. He has worked with some mega brands such as Airtel, Tata Motors, Aeon, and Reliance Communications. Currently, he is building the blue-collar ecosystem at BetterPlace and providing every possible solution to companies for workforce management across their entire life cycle. Welcome to the show, Vishal.
Thanks, Abdul.
Thanks. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us. I'll start with Vishal. So this is a fireside chat that we are organizing, and I would like to ask you one by one. And my first question to you is, Vishal, is how do you think technology has impacted the blue collar ecosystem? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, technology, if you look at this, let's take a step back, right? The classic definition of a blue collar ecosystem varies largely by the industry that you represent, right? And the way you look at this, it's classically the bottom of the pyramid of each of these sectors that you respectively talk about. Now, it's a fairly unorganized, very highly distributed population. With the surge of the pandemic, etc., we've seen there's a huge spurt in terms of how the entire population needs to be managed through one single source, and that's largely technology, because there is no other way to manage a scale of this size and nature. And that's where I think technology has come in as a huge boom to be able to support client organizations manage this workforce. I think what the challenge still lies is organizations typically tend to manage the business part of technology as a priority and then come to the people part of it, right? Now, if the nature of your business is such that the entire business part of technology is aligned to the nature of the business itself, then I think it works extremely well, right? But wherein you don't have technology as a prerequisite or the primary lever of your business, those are industries wherein we see the adoption of technology to be relatively lesser, and the pace at which organizations are adopting it is relatively slower. So largely that's what it is. But I think back to the point, technology is the key to be able to touch upon the entire workforce, to be able to provide various kinds of opportunities, to be able to distribute various kinds of benefits. And that's what BetterPlace does for a living.
Thank you so much, Vishal, for sharing your thoughts and what BetterPlace do. I would like to ask Rahul and ask another aspect of technology. How do you see the future workplace with so much of tech infusion? What are your thoughts?
Abid, at this point of time, the most of the tech which is available, if you look at Gartner's report or the kind of new products which are coming in, are quote unquote meant for what we call as white collared employees. But I think COVID-19 taught us that about 8.4 crore migrant workforce, when they moved from state to state, I think business, the entire economy was dependent on how you could attract them back to their workplace. So that's when I think most of industries realize that we have done very little other than looking at their own attendance and statutory requirements. So for me, the future of tech looks at an integrated system wherein you look at all the life stages of the employee class, whether it is resourcing and onboarding, whether it is managing the employee life cycle, and ensuring that post working in your organization, they stay in some kind of a skill database, quote unquote, the Unnati's database, which Government of India is trying to build, so that there could be rehiring and availability access for future. So it's an integrated system. It is humanized in its way, which means that you have access to multiple languages. We assume that a lot of these employees do not go for the enablement and adoption, which is incorrect because there are other payment apps which have proven this wrong. So India has to go through that journey very quickly to make it as an integrated system.
Coming back to Vishal, I think BetterPlace engages with a lot of industries in different genre. But what kind of shift have you seen amidst the digital transformation? Does it vary industry by industry, or it remains the same?
It varies hugely by industry. That's been our experience in the past all these years. Even more so in the last year and a half, or the keenness to jump on the bandwagon is always there. But a lot of times what we keep facing is other priorities have set in, and thus this has taken a backseat, right? But for good or bad reasons, if you look at, like I said, the bottom of the pyramid, classically for consumer businesses, BFSI, it's your feet on street population, which is that bottom of the pyramid. In a manufacturing setup, it is the classic blue collar ecosystem, which we always call them the way they are. In a retail setup, it's your retail sales associate or your entry level guy at the store. And a lot of these businesses also have their back arm, which is your entire supply chain, warehousing, and so on and so forth, right? Now, if this is the population to be managed across the board, we've seen there's a huge keenness to be able to do this. We've also seen a huge amount of an acceleration in terms of being able to adopt some of this. One of the largest banks in the country, which literally grows at about 20 to 23% YOY, they had their plans of doing this in the next 5 years, right? I don't think one has a choice now to say that you've got to do it in a few months' time, as against the entire luxury that you had planned out for yourself, right? So that, I think the entire nuance is very different. The value chain is very different for each of this population that I spoke about. The workflows are very different. And thanks, Raul, for calling this out, that the entire amount of HR tech that's gotten developed across the globe, including India, has primarily been focusing upon the white collar population. And that's where I think we are so differentiated to say that it's important to be able to develop a platform or be able to develop that larger jigsaw puzzle with a plug and play provision available, which can help you cater to the mass depending upon the industry that you're wanting to cater to. And that's where I think we've seen a huge uptake in terms of being able to adopt the larger digital platform across various industries.
Thank you so much, Vishal. Rahul, there's a debate that It's a never-ending debate about the humanized tech approach. Who is how you can't go ahead without human touch. So I would like to ask you, how does specifically your organization approach the humanized tech part of digital transformation?
I think it goes from very simple part of what Ambuja stroke Wholesome India is known as, is our focus on health and safety. So I think one of the first thing which happens for any employee, any person entering any of our sites, is to ensure that the safety induction, the safety adherence processes are met. This entire process is, let's say, on a tech platform. In certain cases, the employee has to register into the platform, get certified before be able to work at any of the ACC stroke, Ambuja stroke Wholesome sites. For blue collar employees, including logistics partners, they also need to get safety trained. So that's one of the things that we already have online. The other part that we have online are also related to safety processes, that if you're going into certain areas within the manufacturing sites, which are termed as quote unquote, safety risk, there is a registering system, or there is almost in a way a call button wherein which ensures that you are safe working in that place till you come back to your base or zone location. So that bit of it. So this is already exists. I think what could exist further, which we were talking just a minute ago, is we ensure that employees' life cycle is also built into it. At this point of time, we mostly focus on A, statutory payments, B, ensuring the employees' regular payouts happen in their time plans. However, upskilling them as par with many other organizations and industries is a new focus area where an employee should be able to choose certain skills and for work areas that any other white collar employee is able to do. So that's the part of humanization that we are now going into.
Good to hear that. So I'll come back to Vishal and I'll ask. I think a lot of companies come to BetterPlace with their business problems and solve it with technology. That's what you do. So Vishal, how do you think? I want to know your personal view, personal thought. How do you think organization can leverage technology to solve business problems? They are doing a lot. They are doing it with technology, but I want to know from your point of view.
Sure. We face this across the board, right? I mean, in the entire selling cycle, we come across CHROs like Rahul. You have CTOs and CIOs who have their agenda because there is a tech play around it, and a bunch of other stakeholders who are consumers of the services eventually, to be able to have their own priorities defined across what a digital platform can provide you at the end of the day, right? Now, what we've seen is, though we cater to the entire value chain in terms of how do you source people, how do you onboard them digitally with respect to collecting all the documents, demogs, and various other kinds of aspects. We recently acquired another skilling organization as well, which helps you leverage technology to be able to onboard and induct employees at the pre-hiring stage, and then how you manage the entire functionality of the employee well-being, which is right through your time office, daily attendance, rostering, shift management, overtime, eventually all of this feeding into payroll, compliance, and so on and so forth, right? But this by itself is not the problem being solved, right? The problem being solved is, are you making the entire process far more efficient? Is the experience far more seamless? Are you adding to the productivity of the organization? Are you able to cut down on manpower cost, which eventually is involved in managing this entire show? Are you ensuring organizations are far more compliant in the way they function? The entire vendor management, which is an inbuilt part of the entire agenda again, how can that be managed far more seamlessly, and so on, right? So these are the eventual outcomes that we intend to drive, and that's where I think it's important to be able to be perceived as not a tech player providing various kinds of modules, but be able to actually be a problem solver to be able to take care of some of these business needs. Having said this, time and again, what we've also heard is you hire MBA HRs, and because of a lack of great technology or broken processes or two portals and platforms not talking to each other. The guys need to jump in and pull out data, do the entire assimilation, make sense out of it, report back, etc. At the end of the day, it is a transactional task for good or bad reason, right? And I think that the skill that these MBA HRs bring on the table, I think that should be put on forth rather than some of this transactional task which people like us can pull off through the platform itself. So you're not just solving one part of the entire flow of those business problems, but also ensuring that roles are enriched, roles are enhanced, and people do what they're actually there for, rather than being sucked into or being able to support a managed services agenda through the platform.
Thank you, Vishal, for highlighting it and stretching it and making us understand in detailed manner. But I would like to ask one more question to Rahul. Rahul, you mentioned about the humanized tech approach, but there's one additional question. Can you tell us how the right technology can strengthen this the essential touch points with a humanized approach to create a more sustainable workplace?
Thank you. Abid, the answer to that question is a lot in some of the things, what Vishal was talking about, one of the organizations they've acquired recently. We live in these paradigms that blue collared employees, migrant laborers, if you also notice the kind of diction words we choose for your larger workforce, there is kind of a belief or an approach that it is different. It is something which is subterranean in nature. What is above the ground is where your focus is. I think that myth is getting broken, but also needs to be broken further. And many a time in organizations, we talk about diversity and we are kind of fixated on gender diversity or obsessed about gender diversity. We forget the other part called inclusion. And inclusion is not about, just a gender, caste and creed, any of that, but overall workforce in nature. So going back to your question, an ideal tech is something which is co-created, which is based on the basic requirements that is there, which is could be language, practices, beliefs. So, for example, in COVID, there is a lot of people who believe that having a touch point in a biometric system is you're taking my picture and I don't know where it is being used. So, should I be concerned about it? Okay. So, it takes a little time to help adoption also. So, the best tech is created by understanding what is a routine and a behavior or the ritual of the workforce that you are going to use it and provide a simple solution. B, following it up on adoption, and then be able to prove to any of your employers that how is it reducing your absenteeism. Vishal talked about productivity. So the first part which comes is there an absenteeism criteria that it can affect into? Is there a skilling criteria that you're talking into? Because when you walk into plants and large sites, you will see the available time at the workbench and the non-available time. It can be actually monitored and tracked. C, for all the workforce which is vibrant and creative, how have you understood about their life in terms of their needs to upgrade them? Yeah, that's the best tech, and that is what we are talking about. So if I can go off to, let's say, some of the developed economies, if you look at the Teamsters Union in entire that movement in US, the truckers association, their lives, how does the trucking ritual affect the union? That was brought up, and that's how it evolved. Unfortunately, we have taken time as a country to make that step, but I think this is a step in the right direction.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this detailed answer as well. So I think I have two more questions left, one for Rahul and one for Vishal. Vishal, I think you're very tech savvy and positive about technology. So I would like to know what are your thoughts when it comes to adoption of technology? Do you think it's an issue or an excuse to not onboard a digital platform?
We come across this very often, right? I'll borrow from what Rahul highlighted earlier. There are tons of platforms available to cater to the white collar. For blue collar, there aren't any, right? Typically, how we've seen market buy technology or services to cater to the blue collar is a very singular approach, right? So they'll want to buy, they want to have an offering for, let's say, on onboarding services. They will go out to a payroll vendor. They'll go out to an attendance management system provider, and they'll go out to a skilling player, and so on and so forth. I think the change that we are also trying to bring about is how do you impact the buying pattern, right? How do you try and ensure that organizations start looking at this as a seamless platform which caters to the value chain, and not be a summation of 1+1+1 across the entire value chain. I think that's the biggest differentiator, which is wherein the entire piece of saying, I am not keen enough vis-a-vis what value does this bring to the table for me. And that's the dichotomy that we're trying to solve for, to say there is something available, explore it, works well, absolutely go ahead. And at the end of the day, if it does not solve for a client's problem, I'm sure no one's going to adopt it, irrespective of all the sales gyan that we might have to offer to anyone.
Thank you, Vishal. I think, yeah, normally you get that a lot. That's why you're prepared with this, how is it an excuse or not. I'll come back to Rahul for this last question. Rahul, you highlighted all the aspects of humanized tech approach. But I would like to ask you, do you think this humanized tech approach can reduce the gap between a blue collar and a white collar workforce?
Yes, it can, because it's our connotation, something that we have coined. I think firstly, it depends on where the people who are buying the tech, they see value. So the moment you're buying something, whether it is for your white collar employees or blue collar employees, it has to be justified with productivity numbers and utilization. So that's one. Two, when you have bought a tech, you need to heretically be after it to ensure adoption and success. In most of the cases, we fail on that. Three, once you also see there is more demand and customization requests for that tech, which is coming from employees per se, you will see that on skilling platforms. You will see it on some learning and development platforms, some, not all. That's when you see that, okay, now it is all coming together. That's the state where many and most of the developed countries have moved forward to. And that's where I see India will follow shortly.
Thank you so much. Anything else you guys would like to add on in terms of technology? Because I think I have highlighted a lot of questions, but anything else that you would like to personally touch upon, that will be great.
Abid, I would like to make a comment here, because I think that's where, organizations like yours and organizations like Vishal would also have a responsibility. So after the COVID crisis of the migrant laborers moving and all of that, government has on a way of a migrant registration database, and it goes into a platform called Unnati, which is kind of a skill development database. Okay, if you see, and that's where Times also has a huge role to play. There are multiple platforms of skill development and databases which are available. Okay, but they don't talk to each other. It doesn't go back to the same system. Okay, there is a huge opportunity lying here, that once you register a large workforce, ensure that the skills are rightly tagged into, and there's an availability criteria, okay, for the employer. This can become a holistic system, for which 3 or 4 big players have to come together. Industry forums like CII and FICCI can come together, because they also have huge databases to follow. And industry will be more than happy to support it, because it has access and it becomes a virtuous cycle. That would be my last comment.
Okay. Any last comment from you, Vishal? You want to add something on what Rahul said?
I just want to take that what Rahul has called out. I think the entire onus of carrying out the larger ecosystem agenda for the blue collar workforce, I think that definitely is something that we've taken upon ourselves in some sense, and driving that agenda. The primary challenge, and I'm giving it my lens and not Rahul's lens for the change, that the sanctity of the data of this population is a huge task. And I think that's where we struggle to some extent, but largely I think we've made a huge difference in the last all these years. And today the credibility of the data and the database that we have across this population is how we are able to kind of stitch the story and be able to distribute various kinds of benefits, whether it's skilling or any other agenda that we tend to drive through them. But yeah, I think the entire sanctity and the entire credibility of the data and the database is what deters one to be able to push this larger agenda in a specified direction. Classic blue white collar, there are platforms wherein you will find data clean, updated, credible enough to be made use of. There isn't one for the larger blue collar ecosystem, which is as organized as one would expect it to be. So I think that's the hurdle that one does struggle with, but largely that's the direction that we've taken for ourselves as well.
Thank you so much for the last comment, Vishal. It was really good and it was nice hosting you. It was nice hosting both of you. Thank you so much, Rahul, for your time. And thank you so much, Vishal, for your time as well. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys. Bye.